My name is John Hervey. Thanks for tuning into this episode 6 of Creating Your Own Comic Book. We're moving along in the creative process. We've brainstormed, world built, and have been building out characters that flesh out the world. We've worked on identifying our protagonists and their objectives, as well as our main characters, and we've worked on making characters intriguing and even rooting them in a raison d'etre. Now, to further flesh out the world you're building today, we're going to talk about world engines. When writing nonfiction or fiction that is based in the world that we live in, you don't need to break down the physical laws of the world or abilities of particular characters. The rules of physics, biology, and chemistry that we hold on to in this world are assumed true. But when you work in realms of fantasy, the supernatural, and science fiction, your universe most likely has rules that expand beyond the limits of the world that we live in. As a creator, it behooves you to understand your universe, particularly those elements that make your world different or unique from the world as we know it. That's where the concept of world engine comes into play. From a gaming perspective, a world engine is a software framework primarily designed for the development of video games with a series of libraries and supporting programs that not only define the world, but how the world works. So long before gaming, I was building world engines for my stories, and primarily I attribute that to playing D&D when I was younger. Back in the day in D&D, the world engine defined the game's mechanics that underlied the role-playing experience. As part of the process to prepare for a campaign, each participant would create their player character and record the details on a character sheet. The character sheet defined the primary abilities that character had according to the world engine. And then, depending upon those characteristics, you understood the strengths and weaknesses of your character. After rolling to determine the scores, each player strategically applied the numbers they rolled to their character ability scores predicated on the character class or occupation, such as being a fighter or a wizard, that they were looking to create. The character abilities consisted of strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. The player would choose a race or a species, such as a human or an elf, with different races having different what we would call character modifiers, and a moral alignment for each character. In the old school version of D&D, the maximum ability score any human could have was 18, while some of those other races had different maximums. You then utilized all of those items to help weave your character's backstory. Once you started campaigning, performing different tasks had different difficulty classes. There was a random element involved in one's ability to perform a task, as it required the roll of the dice, but you also got modifiers depending upon the score you had in the affiliated ability. So without getting into the mechanics, the higher the related ability score, the higher one's chance of performing a task requiring that ability. Another key element was experience. At low levels of experience, one's bag of tricks, so to speak, was limited, and it could be very difficult to perform those tasks. But as one's level of experience went up, one's bag of tricks became more extensive, and their proficiency increased therein. So, coming back to comics, one of the comics I loved as a kid was Marvel Universe. It wasn't a traditional comic with a story arc. It was basically an encyclopedia of Marvel characters and their abilities. It gave you a basis by which you could compare and contrast characters. Who was stronger, Thor or the Hulk? Who was faster, Quicksilver or North Star? It was lifting the kimono of the Marvel world engine. World engines enable you to set parameters around your world, but they also provide a foundation for character growth. In American comics, we're used to origin stories, revealing a character's power set, and while subsequent issues may go on to develop the characters in other ways, be it relationally or emotionally, their powers are pretty much set. With the implementation of a world engine, you can make the development of a character's powers a longer-term part of the journey in a deliberate way, which is a convention that is used in manga, like the Dragon Ball series, as characters strive for newfound levels of power and ability. So you may feel what I'm talking about, this is an exercise that can quickly turn you in your basement with walls full of cutouts connected by string. Don't let the process be a maddening one. It's worth your while to be on the front end of the development of your world, growing with intentionality rather than being purely reactive and trying to plug holes and logic gaps from the product of ad hoc building in different areas that can end up having unintended results. But don't feel intimidated in doing so. You don't have to accomplish these things in one fell swoop. You can eat the elephant one bite at a time, so to speak. One of the things that made Chris Claremont's X-Men run so amazing is that he took his time in revealing truths about the characters, be it through a baseball game or while defending the planet against aliens. And he left a number of things unrevealed. He never showed everything, which is a mistake that many contemporary comics make, unnecessarily painting themselves into a corner with no space for the organic growth that happens with good stories in differentiated environments. So if you start with a broad world engine and general understandings, you can fill it with specifics as you go. Start with the larger boulders. Then as the story dictates, you can fill in smaller rocks and even pebbles in particular areas. Let the world grow organically. Set the foundational elements and let the world begin to take on a life of its own. Now it's time to apply these principles to your world engine development so you have a great playground for the development of your story. Next session, we will return to characterization as we discuss anti-heroes. Thank you for joining me for this session of World Engines. Please grow with me by subscribing to the Beyond Time YouTube channel and registering at BeyondTimeComics.com, where you can access the full library of Beyond Time Comics. So until next time, use your powers for good, purpose to be a creator and not a destroyer as we walk this path together. Boundless imagination.